What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Stamina Nightblade for the Scalebreaker patch here. So one of the interesting things that I found while I was testing out the Stamina Nightblade was that the Maelstrom dual wield setup was doing pretty much toe-to-toe with your typical Monster Helm setup. And my thinking behind why that is because Stamina Nightblades at the very least, they don't have quite as many dots as other classes, and in addition, they do have the sort of increased complexity with their bow proc, kind of breaking their back bar rotation a little bit. So by the time I went back to my front bar, there was very little time to do the whole rapid strikes first and then rapid strikes last without losing some uptime on my back bar dots. So as a result of this, I could really highly recommend either build, either the VMA build or a more traditional Monster Helm build for a Stamina Nightblade. So this is a pretty interesting sort of conundrum that I kind of came up with, had to kind of face against. So in the end, I decided to go with your more traditional Monster Helm build rather than a Maelstrom build, just because I have a feeling that with practice, the Monster Helm setup will actually end up doing better than the Maelstrom dual wield build, plus the Monster Helm build will be a little bit better in fights where you're not necessarily going to be able to get very good uptime on the Maelstrom buff. So just like the rest of our build videos, we'll be going over gear, skills, attributes, everything you need to know to basically recreate this build yourself. I will discuss briefly some of the other sets that you might want to have on hand to replace some sets depending on the specific fight. Some fights you won't necessarily be able to use certain sets, for example, to their fullest ability. Then we'll talk about the rotation on a 3 million dummy, and then we will do a 21 million raid dummy part so you guys can get an idea of how much DPS the Stamina Nightblade is able to pull in relation to other Stamina DPS. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here first with our gear. So again, this is going to be a Monster Helm setup just because I found the difference between a Maelstrom setup and a Monster Helm setup to be fairly small overall. So for our Monster Helm set, we are going with Maarselok. This comes from the dungeon layer of Maarselok, so you do need to have the newest DLC, Scalebreaker, in order to grab this set here. Overall, really powerful set. It deals 10,400 disease damage to enemies over 4 seconds, and this damage is increased by 5% for each negative effect the enemies have. This does include your traditional debuffs like Major Fracture, Minor Fracture, all those kind of good stuff, but it also includes other effects as well. So for example, the Arms of Relequen set does count as a negative effect, the Rending Slashes Bleed counts as a negative effect, the Ravage Health Poisons count as 2 negative effects because there's 2 different Ravage Health Poisons going on there. So it's actually fairly easy to get very good modifier on Maarselok. 100 to 120% should be fairly easy in a raid. 150 might be pushing it a little bit because that is 30 negative effects, but you can very easily get 20 negative effects on the boss as a Nightblade here. So this set definitely outstrips the other possible Monster Helm sets, which would be Selene's for base game users from Selene's web. The downside of running Selene's is that while it does have a faster cooldown, Maarselok cuts every 7 seconds. Selene's is only single targets versus Maarselok, which I believe can hit multiple people if you manage to catch it in the breath cone, but Selene's is pure single target DPS. The other one is going to be Velidreth, which is still very decent. So this comes from Cradle of Shadows. The one piece is definitely stronger with weapon damage versus max stamina. The two piece is a flat in this case 13,416 disease damage every 9 seconds. Velidreth used to be very strong because multiple disease spores could hit the same boss if the boss had a large enough hitbox and you were close enough to the boss. However, they did change that so only one spore can hit one enemy at a time. And so Velidreth did lose quite a bit of power with that, so that's why Maarselok is now the new Monster Helm set of choice compared to Velidreth or Selene's. Moving on from there, I do want to mention that one of the downsides of running Maarselok is the fact that you have to bash an enemy, so you will need to pay a little bit more attention to your resource management. There are ways around this. Stamina Nightblades, for example, do have very good sustain compared to other stamina classes, so with blue food, you should be able to sustain a Maarselok rotation. But if you feel like you still are using up quite a bit of stamina, you can of course shift some points from your green CPs over to bashing focus to reduce the cost of your bash, so that's one potential option to help mitigate a little bit of that cost of bashing. For our sets, as you can expect, we're still going with Relequen and Perfected Lokkestiiz, so Relequen Perfected Lokkestiiz, and we are running Lokkestiiz as our front bar set here. Relequen has to be on the body because we don't want to risk losing any of those stacks because that takes quite a while to get your stacks back. Relequen comes from Cloud Rest Veteran +1 or higher for the armor pieces. And Lokkestiiz come from Veteran Sunspire, so you do need to have access to those two trials if you want to grab these sets. Now, Relequen is really great for single target DPS. However, in fights where AoE DPS is more important, or you might not necessarily be able to get good uptime on the full stacks of Relequen because the boss might be moving around a lot, Lokkestiiz from Sunspire is a great example of where Relequen is not particularly strong. You do have a few options when it comes to sets. So starting off first with dungeon sets, not light. First set that I want to talk about is going to be Leviathan. This is basically the stamina version of Mother Sorrow, gives you a lot of additional weapon crit. With the crit damage meta that we're currently in for DPS, Leviathan is a very strong choice here. It is a static bonus, so ideally you're wearing this on the body, but you can also wear this as a front bar set if you prefer, although I don't recommend doing that, but it is a potential option. It's very similar to Mother Sorrow, where you get the crit on the front bar, but you lose it on the back bar when you swap over to your unique weapon on the back bar. But other than that, the only other dungeon set that I would recommend picking up would be Sogvin's Warband. This comes from Frostvault. So whenever you deal critical damage, you gain a stack of precision up to 10 stacks, and when you get 10 stacks, you get minor force, and you get just over 6% additional weapon crit. Sogvin's is not quite as strong as Advanced Yokeda. Advanced Yokeda gives you just shy of 10% additional weapon crits, but Sogvin's does have additional physical penetration armor bonus, which does allow you to shift some points out of piercing and put them into other CP passives. Just gives you a little bit more flexibility when it comes to things like weapon traits and CP distributions. Sogvin's is fairly useful, and it is definitely a front barable set because the stacks do last for 10 seconds, so quite easy to get in your back bar, do your back bar dust, and then go to your front bar without losing your stacks. So definitely a powerful set to hold on to there. From there, you have very, very few overland sets, but there is, at the very least, probably one that I should talk about for overland sets here. That's going to be Strigan's Thorns, which gives you additional physical penetration. Very great for trash fights, because you're not necessarily going to be able to guarantee major fracture on everything. But having the additional physical penetration will allow you to do your maximum damage in these sort of trash pulls. But beyond that, there aren't really any other medium armor overland sets that are particularly useful or strong. The only other one being potentially Briarheart, which comes from Hrothgar. So whenever you do critical damage, you have a chance to increase your weapon damage, and while your weapon damage is increased, you also heal whenever you do a critical hit. Still pretty nice set. It's kind of mid-tier, I would say, but definitely a good set to hold you over while you're farming for your other sets here. The good thing about Briarheart is that because it's a proc compared to Hunding's Rage, which is a flat bonus, it does carry over to your back bar, so you're able to use a front bar Briarheart set if you'd like. So something like Lokkestiiz as your body and Briarheart as your front bar set is perfectly possible to do. This does give Briarheart an edge over Hunding's Rage because of the fact that it does carry over to your back bar. So those are the only two overland sets that are pretty decent to hold on to. And finally, in terms of trial sets, there are two trial sets that I want to mention here. The first one is going to be Twice Fang Snake, Twice Fang Serpent. This basically fits the same niche as Strigan's Thorns, where for trash fights you get that additional penetration. It's a little bit stronger than Strigan's Thorn. You get 4,300 physical penetration when you have your max stacks, so really powerful in trash fights. Next we have War Machine, which pairs very, very nicely with Stamina Nightblades with their 70 cost ultimate with Incapacitating Strike. So you can wear this as a front bar set, so that way just remember to use Incap on your front bar, or you can wear this as a body set so you can use Incap on either bar without really caring too much. Overall, a very powerful set here. This comes from Halls of Fabrication, so you do have access to the Vardenfell expansion to get this set. One last set that I want to touch upon here is going to be Vicious Serpent, also known as Vicious Ophidian. Not quite as strong as some other trial sets. It does give you access to the Minor Slayer bonus, and it does reduce the cost of your stamina abilities by 8%. However, Stamina Sustain, at the very least for Stamina Nightblade, is fairly easy even with Maarselok, so Vicious Serpent is not particularly strong on a Nightblade, but it is fairly useful for that Minor Slayer bonus. It's probably the only way to get Minor Slayer as a base game user, so definitely don't discount Vicious Serpent if you are a base game user. From there, in terms of armor traits and enchants, for all of our armor, we're going with all medium, all divines, all max stamina enchants. For our jewelry, you can go Bloodthirsty or Infused. Try to shy away from Robust because it's not quite as strong as Infused. So Infused or Bloodthirsty with 3 weapon damage enchants. For our weapons, we have Nirnroot on the main hand. You can also use Precise on the main hand as well, and then Sharpened on the offhand. You can also go double Sharpened, but typically speaking, Nirnroot Sharpened is going to give you the better results. And make sure to have 1 axe and 1 dagger. It doesn't matter what hand you put your specific weapon on. The most important thing to take note of is that your Nirnroot weapon needs to be on the main hand in order to get the full 200 additional weapon damage. Still using double Ravage Health poisons here. Then for our back bar, we are using a Master's Bow infused with a weapon damage enchant. You still want to hold on to a Maelstrom Bow, same sort of traits, same sort of enchants there. The Maelstrom Bow will be more useful for sort of AoE cleave damage, and the Master's Bow will be more useful for straight up single target DPS. So make sure to have both bows there and swap out accordingly. Moving on to our character sheet, I am a Dark Elf. Dark Elves are among the best races for stamina DPS. Very, very strong. They get 1875 additional max stamina and 258 additional weapon damage. You also get 1875 additional max magicka and 258 additional spell damage. So in terms of their flexibility with flip-flopping between the 2 different DPS specs, Dark Elves are definitely the best option here. In terms of the best raw stats, you're going to want to go with the Orcs. They get 2000 stamina, 258 weapon damage, and 1000 max health. So you also get a little bit of additional survivability, breathing room there as an Orc. You can also go with what I like to call the sustain races. Those would be the Imperials, Red Guards, or the Wood Elves, the Bosmer. All 3 of those races get 2000 max stamina, and each of them get their own source of sustain. They don't get any weapon damage bonus, so your DPS ceiling will be on the lower side of things compared to on the Orc or a Dark Elf. So Bosmer, for example, get 258 additional stamina regen, which is affected by modifiers. Red Guards get, I believe, 990 stamina back every couple of seconds whenever they deal direct damage. And Imperials get 3% additional cost reduction to all abilities, and they get 330, I believe, or 333 magic health and stamina back every few seconds whenever they deal damage as well. So very powerful sustain bonuses there, but they do lose the additional weapon damage that the Dark Elves and the Orcs get, so their DPS ceiling is lowered. Finally, if you kind of want to go for a jack of all trades sort of build, for example, you're not sure if you want to do healing, tanking, you want to do magic DPS, you could also go with Khajiits. Khajiits do get max resources across the board, so they get max magicka, max health, max stamina, not quite as much, I believe it is 825. They do get magicka and stamina regen, 85 for each, and they get 100 health regen, and then they get 10% additional critical healing done and critical damage done. So if you kind of want to go for a jack of all trades sort of build on your Nightblade, then Khajiits are a very solid option there, but much like the sustain races, their DPS ceiling is going to be lower than a Dark Elf or an Orc if you're just looking at pure raw DPS. In terms of attributes, we are using blue bi-stat food, so we don't need to worry too much about health. So we have all of our attribute points are in stamina. We don't need to put any points into health here. We're sitting at 17.6k max health right now. If you want to put some points into health, you certainly can, although I don't necessarily recommend it, because with Ebon and with minor toughness, you should be sitting at just over 20k max health, so not really all that necessary because you are using blue food. Now, if you decide to use something like Artaeum Takeaway Broth or Dubious Cormorant Throne for additional sustain, because you're not able to sustain full light attack rotation with blue food, in that instance, yes, you would want to shift a few points into health here. If you're a Dark Elf, if you're an Orc, your additional 1000 max health should be pretty decent. Should be good enough to get you up to an acceptable level of health with Ebon and minor toughness. We are still going with the Shadow Mundus here. It's still the strongest Mundus in the game. Nothing has changed with Mundus Stones in this patch. And then, of course, I just mentioned bi-stat food. This is the base game blue food, max health and max stamina. Going over our skills next, just need to double check something. Okay, so for starting off with our front bar, this is our dual wield bar. We have Killer's Blade, Surprise Attack, Running Slashes, Relentless Focus, Barbed Trap, and Incapacitating Strike. For our back bar, we have Consuming Soul Trap, Poison Injection, Arrow Barrage, Leeching Strikes, Dark Shade, and Incapacitating Strike again. You can swap this out with something like Flawless Stormbreaker if you'd like, so maintain a 3% additional weapon damage on the back bar, but Incapacitating Strike does give you a little bit more DPS on average. It really depends on how much weapon damage you're running. You could also replace Dark Shade with any other ability, so for example, if you need additional heal, you can certainly replace this with Vigor, for example, or you can do something like Mirage or something like that for some additional survivability instead of Dark Shades here. Dark Shades is a fairly weak dot overall. but it's kind of better than anything else. You could also replace this with Barbed Trap for additional 3% weapon damage, very similarly to Flawless Dawnbreaker, but it's kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. Now, if you are running a Maelstrom dual wield build, a couple of things you're going to change here. First of all, you will not be running a Monster Helm set. Instead, you'll be finishing off one of your 2 5 pieces. So, for example, I'm running Relequen Lokkestiiz. I'd just be running Lokkestiiz helm and shoulders here. Then I'd be running the Maelstrom Axe, Maelstrom Dagger, dual wield front bar. Same exact traits here, Nirn, sharpened. And then I would replace Surprise Attack here with Rapid Strikes. And the rotation for that would be a little bit different, and we'll go over that when we go over the rotation at the 3 million dummy. In terms of our CPs, the CP cap is 810, which gives us 270 points to put across each of our different constellation colors. And I will shift a couple of green CP points around while we talk. So the most important thing is to get 100 into Mooncap to get your max stamina regen. From there, you do have a few options here. Your sustain should be pretty decent, so you don't necessarily need 75 in tenacity. You can shift some points out of tenacity if you would like. And then that would give you a couple more points to put into other nodes here. So for example, I have 28 Bashing Focus, 31 Warlord, 31 Tumbling, 31 Shadow Ward. You can kind of replace your CPs however you'd like here. The most important thing is to get that 100 into Mooncalf. For our blue CPs, this particular setup assumes that you're getting all the debuffs possible in the game. So that'd be things like Infused Torx Crusher, Alkosh, Minor Fracture, etc, etc. So for all of that, you will need 61 points into Piercing. Now, if you decide to run something like Double Sharpen, or you're running Sogvins with Lokkestiiz, so you get some additional physical penetration from running Sogvins, you can shift some points out of Piercing and put them into other nodes. So kind of up to you how you want to go around with that. You have 49 Piercing, 61 Piercing I should say, 49 Mighty, 56 Precise Strikes, 52 Thaumaturge, and 52 into Master at Arms. Finally, our red CPs, this is sort of a more balanced approach to things. So we have 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick Skin, and 64 in both Hardy and Elemental Defender. So that's pretty much it for all the build information. So now let's go ahead and talk about the rotation itself, starting off with our Monster Helm setup here. So Maarselok, you need to bash every 7 seconds. So what I like to do is basically whenever I put up Rending Slashes, because you do want to maximize the damage, so you want to have as many negative debuffs as you can when you use Maarselok. I typically speaking will do it after I use Rending Slashes and then just bash that way. It's very helpful to rebind bash if you are on console to a different key. So for example, I have it bound to one of my mouse keys here, so that way I don't have to block and use my light attack. That does end up cutting into your stamina regen, because you don't regen while blocking, versus if you just have it bound to a different key, so it's just a bash, you don't lose that stamina regen tick. So the rotation itself is fairly straightforward. You just want to make sure you have all your buffs active before you start a rotation, so that'd be siphoning and your bow, and then you just do your backbar dots here. Then whenever your bow proc is up, you just want to make sure to use it. That was bad. I read up the bow proc. Bad. But the general idea is just to do your back bar dots. Go to your front bar and put up your front bar dots, so that'd be Rending Slashes, Rearming Trap, Barbed Trap, and then use Maarselok Bash. All of your back bar dots should be maintained. I'm actually going to swap out Dark Shades for Barbed Trap here, just as it makes the rotation a little bit easier. Less back bar dots to have to deal with. And then when you have your bow proc, you should break your back bar rotation to use your bow proc. So for example, if you have, let's say you go into your back bar with 3 bow light attacks, then you do your Endless Hail, Light Attack, Soul Trap. At that point, you want to basically swap to your back bar, front bar again and get your bow proc off. So you do a Light Attack, bow proc, go back to your back bar and finish off your back bar dots. So real quickly again, this is kind of what it would look like. So when you hit 4, it's going to be a Light Attack, hit your bow proc. So here, for example, you go to your front bar, and then finish your back bar rotation. You can also get the bow proc off and then do your back rotation if you'd like. Here again, you would direct your back bar rotation to get the bow proc off, and then go back to your front bar and do your rotation on your front bar. Go ahead and kill the dummy, so that way we can get some stamina back, so I can kill the dummy. And then we can do our raid dummy parts, yeah, to get an idea of how much damage that we're able to do on this build compared to some other stamina DPS. So we are doing it on a raid dummy, that way we can sort of standardize the buffs that we're getting. And we can also kind of see in a raid scenario what kind of DPS we can pull. Now this is going to be slightly inflated just because we are getting 100% major force uptime, which is obviously not realistic, pretty much impossible in a raid environment. So it is going to be slightly inflated, but because this buffs are standardized across all of the different classes, this does give us an opportunity to compare parses across the board, at the very least my personal parses, not necessarily, you know, comparing to somebody like Lyco, for example. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here with our parse. One thing I do want to point out before we start the parse, because it might be difficult for me to parse and talk about this at the same time, is that Incapacitating Strike does have a cast time. So you can see here a 0.4 second cast time. So you do have to have the cast time play out entirely before you can make any other action, light attack, ability, bar swap. So just keep that in mind with Incapacitating Strike here. So let's go ahead and get started. Did accidentally use a synergy on the back bar rather than on the front bar. Take the bow proc off before doing that back bar dodge. I do recommend just making sure, because we are running Lokkestiiz on the front bar, that you do remember to use synergies only on your front bar. Now, this parse is actually quite bad. I think what we're going to do is we're just going to restart the parse here. I think a little bit of lag is starting to get into here. So we'll just restart the parse here. I do want to give you guys definitely an accurate representation of DPS rather than sort of a inaccurate representation. So we'll just restart the parse here. No, I'm still getting the lag. Oh well. We'll just deal with the lag then. That. I can see here the lag is starting to get to us here. Proc off with the back bar. This lag is sometimes causing my abilities not to go off. And I use this thing on the back. This parse is pretty bad. Making a lot of mistakes on this parse here. That's good. I've taken penalties on the back bar quite a bit here. Now that we're in execute, the only things we need to maintain at this point are our back bar dots. You don't necessarily need to use the bow proc anymore here. Please let me do all my abilities in a timely manner. Oh, now it's double casting. Oh, this parse is just garbage. Good thing I think I have a good, better parse saved away. Let me just double check. So this parse was pretty garbage. So yeah, this was an 82k parse, so pretty garbage. I messed up the rotation quite a bit there. But I had a better parse earlier. Here it is. So better parse would have been 85k or so. It's probably the highest I've managed to hit. This was with better Major Slayer uptime because I didn't use synergies on the back bar. A little bit better lag kind of stuff here. Generally speaking, not as good RNG crit here. So you can see here 65.7% versus 51%. Part of that is the fact that we do have Maarselok and Relequen which don't crit. So, but that's still on the lower end of things when it comes to overall crit RNG, and we kind of see that reflected a little bit with Assassin's Scourge and Killer's Blade, where they have 59 and 61% crit, so a little bit low crit there. So this parse could be a little bit higher if crit chance was a little bit more level with the mean, probably about 86, 87k potentially. But generally speaking, this is kind of what you can expect to see from a Stamina Nightblade if you don't screw up the rotation like I did there quite a few times. So that is it for this build video. Hope you guys found this informative. Apologies about the rotation, but I was getting a little bit frustrated with the lag and some of my abilities not firing off correctly. So yeah, apologies for that. But this is the amount of DPS you can expect to pull, about 85k or so. So if you guys have any questions about the build, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.